I used to believe that love could last forever as long as you gave everything, stayed loyal, and stood by each other's side through storms and sunshine. But after 8 years of marriage, Ethan Carter, me husband, the man I had once thrown myself in front of a whip for, looked at me the same way one might glance at an old couch, familiar, useful, and utterly uninspiring. When he mentioned for the third time how cute his secretary Mia was, I gently set down my fork and said, "Let's get a divorce." He blinked, stunned, but didn't refuse. That's the kind of ending we had. No shouting, no drama, no last-minute desperation. Just a quiet rupture that had been building up in the stale air of our home for years. Outside the Civil Affairs Bureau in downtown New York, he whispered like a man who still didn't realize what he'd lost, "I'm sorry, can we still be friends?" I didn't even look at him. "No need," I replied. "I never want to see you again." But that's not how our story started. Once upon a time, I entered the pages of a book and found Hema scrawny, bruised teenager crouching in the corner of a cold classroom, his father an alcoholic monster, his classmates merciless bullies. I was the girl who walked toward him in the sunlight, took his hand, and shielded him when no one else would. He used to say I was the only light in his world. He used to mean it. I helped him through school, stayed up late helping him memorize formulas, defended him against the world, and when his father raised a knife in drunken rage, I flung myself over Ethan to take the blow. Blood ran down my back, but he survived, and he never forgot that I changed the trajectory of his life. We eventually married, had 2 beautiful kids, Lucas and Emma, and built a life that, on the outside, seemed perfect. But love isn't just built on debt and memory. In the everyday lull of domestic routine, Ethan began to fade away. The man who once knelt in the snow to confess his love now barely remembered to look up from his phone at dinner. He was loyal, yes, but loyal like a responsible employee to a company he'd long stopped caring about. One evening, I stood outside his office on the top floor of Carter Corp headquarters, holding a fruit plate I brought as a surprise. Through the slightly ajar door, I heard laughter. Mia Sullivan. Of course. Her giggle was light, flirtatious, the kind of sound that used to come from me when I was 18 and still believed love fixed everything. Then Ethan's voice came, wistful and low. "You remind me of my wife when she was young. So full of energy, like the sun that never sets." Mia responded coyly, "Your wife sounds amazing. Why don't you go home more often?" A pause. Then his voice, flat but sharp, like an accidental paper cut. "She's older now. The house is noisy. It smells like kids. Sometimes it's nice to just breathe." I didn't push the door open. I didn't storm in. I just stood there, staring through the crack at the 2 of them, too close, hands brushing, eyes soft with a familiarity that wasn't theirs to share. And yet, despite all that, when I confronted him later and demanded that Mia be let go, Ethan laughed. "You're jealous," he said, half amused, half exasperated. "Come on, Claire. You're a mother of 2 now, and you're jealous of a secretary? Isn't that a little undignified?" I didn't answer. He did fire Mia the next day. He started coming home earlier, smiling more, treating me like porcelain again. But it all felt too perfect, too staged, too late. The warmth was synthetic, and I was exhausted. At our daughter's school event, he bailed with a tired excuse and asked his assistant to accompany me instead. That same afternoon at St. Grace Medical Center, I saw Mia again. She was supporting her frail, gray-haired mother into the CT room. Our eyes met. She froze. Her mother was muttering about how Mr. Carter was such a gentleman for helping arrange her surgery, and that Mia should take advantage of that pretty face and lock him down before some other girl did. Mia turned red and shushed her. When I approached, she greeted me with a nervous, "Hello, Mrs. Carter." I replied calmly, "What did my husband help you with?" She fidgeted. "It was for my mother." I asked him just out of old friendship. Old friendship, huh? Later that night, I asked Ethan directly. He didn't lie. He told me Mia reminded him of me. "Sometimes," he said, eyes lowered, "it's like looking at a photograph of you when we first met. I showed him the hospital footage my assistant had secretly filmed Mia blushing, clinging to his arm, her mother smiling approvingly. Is that what I've become to you? I asked. Just nostalgia? Ethan looked broken. I didn't mean to betray you. I didn't do anything, Claire. I swear. But sometimes I miss how things used to be. You were so bright, so alive. Now everything feels so gray. Because I grew up? I asked bitterly. Because I bore your children and held our house together while you chased your legacy? No, he said, his voice breaking. Because I got used to you. I stopped appreciating you and I hate myself for it. But I couldn't let this go. I had been his redeemer, yes, but not his life sentence. I refused to let my identity shrink to the wife he owes. I smiled coldly and said, I want a divorce. He didn't argue. His silence was the answer. In the days that followed, I negotiated the divorce terms myself. He offered the villa, the assets, the shares. I asked for more: child custody, inheritance clauses, sterilization. Yes, sterilization. I didn't want another woman bearing his heir and challenging my children's legacy. Ethan was stunned, but agreed. Okay, he whispered. If that's what it takes. I nodded. 8 years of marriage, over a decade of history, and this is what it came to. I was methodical, calculated, detached. Because if I let myself feel, I would collapse. I moved forward because I had to. Because someone had to show our children that it's okay to walk away from a love that no longer serves you, no matter how deep its roots go. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to see if I could still be desired, not remembered. Which is when Ryan Kim, 18, baby-faced, newly scouted actor, walked into my life. But that is for later. Ryan Kim was only 18, with skin like milk and eyes full of ambition and unfiltered admiration, the kind of look Ethan used to give me before life wore him down and I became background noise in his grand plan. I met Ryan again at a business function, and when he slipped me his card, there was no shame in his gaze, just hope. Later, when I asked my assistant to bring him to the Peninsula Hotel suite, he sat on the sofa looking nervous, but not scared, trying to play cool in a world he clearly hadn't mastered. I sat across from him in a silk robe, legs crossed, sipping a glass of wine and watching his Adam's apple bob every time he tried to speak. I asked him if he really knew what he wanted. He whispered, I want a chance, ma'am. The ma'am made me laugh a little, so I set the glass down and said flatly, you weren't hoping to just talk business, were you? His cheeks flushed, but he didn't back away. Instead, he knelt, held my hand in both of his, and said with genuine innocence, I'll do whatever it takes to make you happy. And I believed him. That was the worst part. Not because he lied, but because he didn't know any better. He didn't know yet how people lose themselves trying to be someone else's fantasy. So I let him into my life, not into my heart, just into my schedule. Twice a week, no more, no less. He was punctual, sweet, and naive enough to think that roses and back rubs were enough. Maybe for a while, they were. Sometimes he'd tell me stories about auditions and set drama. Sometimes he'd cook me dinner and ask me if I was okay in the softest voice. It wasn't love. It was therapy with a warm body. When Ethan came by the house to pick up paperwork or drop off something for the kids, I made no effort to hide Ryan. If Ethan asked questions, I'd smirk and say, we're divorced, remember? And if he dared raise his voice, I'd shut him down with a single look that said, you lost your right to care. Once, after a gala where I brought Ryan as my date, Ethan cornered me in the foyer and hissed, you really think flaunting him around won't affect the kids? I turned my head lazily and said, you mean like how Mia didn't affect our marriage? He shut up after that. But that night, I found Ryan in the garden of the venue, pale and shaken. A group of rich women had surrounded him like vultures, taunting him with snide comments about me, mocking him for being a boy toy, calling me pathetic for clinging to youth. I snapped. I tore into them with every ounce of my power, reminding them that I was still Claire Bennett, executive, shareholder, mother, and not someone you could mock just because I chose a younger man. One of the women, Vanessa Blake, Ethan's latest companion, tried to provoke me by joking that she'd like a turn with Ryan, and before she could finish the sentence, I shut her down so hard even Ethan had to apologize for her. The organizers handed me 2 limited edition auction pieces as an apology, and I handed them to Ryan on the spot. Mental damage compensation, I said with a smirk. He looked like he wanted to cry. Later that night, back at home, Ethan showed up drunk, leaning against the doorframe of my bedroom, staring at me like I'd just shot his dog. You touched his hair, he slurred, voice low and resentful. You used to touch mine like that. I blinked. Are you drunk? He nodded and stepped forward, trying to press his head against my hand like some heartbroken dog. Please, just once. I backed away and called the bodyguards. Escort him out, I said flatly. Knock him out if you have to. He panicked and pulled at my sleeve like a child begging not to be left alone. I'll be good, he whispered. Don't ignore me. I didn't answer. I just turned around and walked away. The next morning, Ethan was in my living room, playing with the kids like nothing happened. I didn't acknowledge him, just went upstairs and got ready for my day. Later, he tried to talk. We haven't had a real conversation in months, he said. I told him I had plans. It was Ryan's birthday. I went with him to Liberty Park Amusement and tried to enjoy the rides, the popcorn, the forced joy, but my heart wasn't in it. Ryan noticed. You don't look like you're having fun, he said gently. I smiled. It's not you. It's me. The last time I came here was with my ex after our second child. I was drowning in postpartum depression, and he tried to cheer me up by bringing me here. For a moment, I believed it might work. He held me under the Ferris wheel and said, I'll always love you, Claire. You're my home. Ryan went quiet. So, are you still in love with him? I laughed. No. He's in love with who I used to be. And maybe I used to be in love with who he pretended to be. At that moment, I realized I didn't even want the excitement Ryan brought. I didn't crave his attention, his youth, or the novelty. What I missed was peace. Stability. Home. Not the illusion of it, the real thing. I patted his hand and said softly, let's stop here. I'll give you the resources you need, films, endorsements, but from here on out, you walk your own path. He looked disappointed but not surprised. I always felt like you treated me more like a kid brother than a lover, he said quietly. I nodded. That's probably because you reminded me of someone I once saved. Not someone I wanted to keep. He asked if he could hug me one last time. I let him. His arms were warm, trembling a little, and I felt the tiniest flicker of emotion, then let it go. After he left, I stood alone under the setting sun, watching the carousel turn slowly. No tears, no regret. Just a quiet acceptance that I had tested the waters and found nothing worth diving into. I went home, hugged my kids, helped Emma with her coloring, and laughed when Lucas tried to play grown-up and asked if I was divorced for real. I told him yes, but that we both loved him and his sister very much. Later that night, I called Ethan. Come spend more time with the kids, I said. He snapped, busy with your new boy toy? I rolled my eyes. You're not my husband anymore, Ethan. You don't get to be jealous. Well, maybe I still care, he barked. I smirked. No. You just can't stand losing. He went silent. Then whispered, okay, I'll come by. But the tone in his voice said it all wasn't done. And neither was the story. Because when you burn someone to the ground, they don't always die. Sometimes, they smolder. And Ethan Carter was about to find out what happens when a woman stops living for someone else and starts living for herself. But I had no idea yet that his regrets were only just beginning, and soon, he'd be willing to give up everything, including the empire I helped him build, just for a second chance he'd never deserve. It wasn't long after I cut things off with Ryan that Ethan started popping up in my life like a stubborn weed you thought you'd already pulled, lingering around the house under the guise of dropping off school supplies, asking the kids strange questions like if Mom ever talked about missing Dad, or randomly calling me to say nothing useful at all. I didn't entertain it. I didn't snap either. I was past anger. Anger required energy, and I'd spent years exhausting every emotional calorie on that man. But then one morning I woke up late, still tangled in my sheets, the light filtering in soft and warm, and I thought I was dreaming because I swore I saw a man sitting at the edge of my bed. I screamed. Naturally. Until I realized it was Ethan. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm sorry," he said, voice hoarse and low. I regret it, Claire. I regret everything. They're not you. No one is. I thought I wanted something different, something exciting, but it's all empty. You were my home. I want to come back." I stared at him like he'd grown horns. "Are you high?" He flinched, but didn't back down. "No. Just desperate." And I believed him. Which made it worse. Because desperation was not love. It was guilt, nostalgia, and the terrifying realization that you let go of the one person who actually cared about you. He followed me into the kitchen, watching as I poured coffee like I hadn't just heard a full-blown confessional. "You're seriously doing this now?" I asked. "After the headlines, after the models, after playing Bachelor of the Year?" "Those were nothing," he said too quickly. "I didn't even touch them." I laughed so hard I almost choked. "And that makes you a saint?" He didn't answer. He just looked at a framed photo on the wall, our family from last Christmas, Lucas mid-sneeze, Emma grinning wide, and both of us smiling like we hadn't fallen apart yet. His eyes glazed over. "I miss this," he said. "Too bad," I replied. "You don't get to miss what you threw away." Still, he kept coming. A week later, he showed up at my office, looking like he hadn't eaten in days, holding a thick envelope. Inside were legal documents, full property transfer, share control, and a written clause stating that if he ever cheated again, everything would revert to me. "My words mean nothing, I know that now," he said. "So let my actions prove I'm serious." I didn't touch the papers. "You're insane," I said, but my voice wasn't angry, it was tired. He stared at me, pleading. "Claire, I can't live without you." "You've been doing just fine," I replied. "All that charm, all that success. You had what you wanted. Go back to it." "I don't want it," he said, tears pooling. "I want you. I want the life I had with you. The kids, the quiet, the stupid Tuesday night takeouts." I thought it was boring, but it was peace. It was happiness. I was just too blind to see it. I felt something in my chest twist, but I held firm. "You thought I'd be waiting forever?" He shook his head. "I thought I'd never need to beg." And there it was. The truth. The man who had once sworn to love me forever was now begging because he didn't know how to handle being alone. And it wasn't my job to fix that. Not anymore. That night, I sat by the window with a glass of wine, listening to Ethan's voice on the other side of the door. He was reading aloud the love letter he'd written to me when we were teenagers, the one he had slipped into my locker with trembling hands and a fake return address. "The first time I saw you, I knew you were my home," he read, his voice breaking. "Miss Claire Bennett, will you spend forever with me?" And for a moment, I wanted to cry. Not because I still loved him, but because that boy, the one who wrote that letter, was long gone. Replaced by a man who needed to lose everything to understand what he had. And I wasn't going to be his redemption arc anymore. The next day, we met again, this time at Riverstone Cafe, a place neutral enough not to hold ghosts. He looked better, more collected, dressed in a gray suit with those familiar tired eyes. "I just want to ask one thing," he said, sipping his coffee without tasting it. "Remarry me." I blinked. "Excuse me." "For the kids," he added quickly. "They need stability. A father. And I can't stand the idea of another man playing that role." I nearly snorted. "You mean Ryan?" He didn't answer, which said enough. "You're not jealous," I said. "You're territorial." "Maybe," he admitted. "But I know what we had, Claire. And I know we can rebuild it." "No," I said softly but firmly. "We can't." He looked gutted. "You don't even want to try?" I leaned forward. "What if I do try? What happens when, 5 years from now, I'm too tired again? What happens when you see another 20-something who reminds you of me, and you start missing who I used to be again? You'll leave all over again." "That's what happens." "No," he said desperately. "I've changed." "People don't change that quickly," I replied. "They just get better at hiding the parts that caused the damage." He lowered his eyes. "So that's it?" "That's it." I stood up and left him there, staring at an empty chair across from him. Days passed. He texted. He called. He showed up at the kids' school functions with cupcakes and puppy eyes. I let him play his part. I let him wear the mask of the repenting ex-husband. But I never invited him back in. Because I had learned something valuable through all of this. Love isn't about clinging to the past or forgiving someone just because they finally realized your worth. It's about choosing yourself even when the apology comes dressed in flowers and legal paperwork. And I had chosen myself, my peace, my future. He used to call me his light. Now I am my own. And nothing burns brighter than a woman who walked through the fire, looked love in the face, and said, "Not like this." People love to romanticize regret, as if a man crying at your doorstep and whispering old love letters somehow erases the years he spent drifting away from you, replacing kisses with indifference, and coming home later and later with cologne you didn't recognize. But I knew better. Regret isn't love, it's just guilt wearing yesterday's cologne. So when Ethan showed up yet again, trying to make his pathetic little redemption arc more poetic, I didn't even flinch. He sat on my living room couch as our kids chased each other down the hall, the same kids he used to ignore for work emergencies and late meetings, and said something that made me freeze. "Claire, I'm willing to get a vasectomy." At first, I thought I'd misheard him. "Excuse me?" He looked me dead in the eye, the same eyes that used to lie so easily. "I know you don't trust me. I know you think I'll eventually have another family, another child. So let me prove I won't. I'll do the surgery. No second families. Ever." I stared at him for a long time, trying to decide whether to laugh or scream. I ended up doing neither. "You're a little too late for gestures," I said. "Snipping doesn't undo the emotional amputation you already performed on this marriage." But of course, Ethan didn't stop there. The man had a whole arsenal of theatrics. At a charity gala 1 week later, he made sure to stand just far enough away with his latest arm candy, some 23-year-old finance heiress in a backless dress, looking smugly in my direction, like she'd won a prize. I didn't blink. I didn't care. I came with my assistant, smiled at the cameras, and toasted champagne like a woman who no longer owed her ex-husband even the courtesy of jealousy. But I noticed something. When she laughed too loudly, Ethan flinched. When she clung to his arm like a child grabbing candy, he shifted slightly away. He was performing again, but not for her, for me. That night, he cornered me in the hallway near the powder room, and instead of some overdramatic apology, he whispered, "I couldn't go through with the surgery." I raised an eyebrow. Cowardice or hope? He looked embarrassed. "Both." "Good," I said, stepping past him. "Let that hope rot." I thought that would be the end of it, that he'd finally get tired of trying to claw his way back into a life he broke, but then came the night I came home to find a package on my doorstep. No sender listed. Inside was a photo album, hand-bound, full of candid shots I had no memory of: cooking with Emma on my hip, me fixing Lucas's Halloween costume, me asleep on the couch with a book in my lap. Ethan had been collecting them quietly over the years, apparently taking photos when I wasn't looking, freezing versions of me that even I had forgotten. The cover was inscribed with one line in his handwriting: "The woman I failed to keep." I should have been moved. I should have cried. But instead, I felt numb. Because it didn't matter how many memories he captured if he hadn't cared enough to live them with me when they happened. You can't love a ghost, and you definitely don't get credit for mourning someone you made invisible. I left the album on the kitchen counter and went to bed. The next day, Ethan showed up unannounced at the villa while I was out back with the kids. He didn't say a word. Just stood there holding 2 coffees. I didn't take mine. He set it down and asked, "Can we talk?" "About what?" I asked, watching Lucas toss a ball too hard and nearly take down a garden light. Ethan's voice was calm, almost too calm. "About the fact that I finally understand what I lost. That it's not just about missing you, it's about knowing I can't build anything better." I glanced at him. "That sounds more like settling than love." "It's not," he said quickly. It's the clarity that comes after you ruin the best thing that ever happened to you and realize there's no rewind button." "Too bad," I replied. I'm not your therapist, and this isn't your redemption tour. Claire, he begged, and I could hear his voice crack again. I'm not asking for a second chance right now. I just want you to know I'm not giving up. That's not romantic, I said. It's exhausting. I walked back inside without another word. A few weeks passed. Quiet ones. Peaceful. I focused on work, on my kids, on cooking dinners that didn't involve waiting for someone to come home late and complain about cold takeout. Until New Year's Eve. The kids begged to spend it with both parents, like before, and I, being the emotionally responsible one, agreed. Ethan showed up in a navy sweater, holding a bottle of red and that familiar awkwardness, like he didn't know where he fit anymore. We toasted, we smiled, we danced around questions. Then, after the kids were asleep, I went to wash up. When I came out, I heard something soft, familiar, painful. He was at the front door, reciting the old love letter again, word for word, whispering into the wood as if he could reach me through it. I mistook excitement for love, and I didn't realize until you were gone that the only thrill I ever needed was watching you laugh at your own jokes. I sat down quietly, back against the door, and listened. I didn't say anything. I just let the silence answer for me. Because that's all I had left to give him, silence. Ethan Carter wasn't a monster. He was just a man who believed that loyalty was automatic, that love was guaranteed, and that good women waited forever. He forgot that even the brightest flames burn out if you smother them long enough. I used to think he was my person. Now, I think he was just the chapter before the real story started. And if he keeps showing up at my door, trying to rewrite the ending, I'll keep turning the page. After New Year's, something shifted, not in me, but in Ethan. It was like he finally realized that no matter how many times he showed up at my door with soft eyes and sad declarations, I wasn't going to throw myself into his arms like a rerun of the past. He started spiraling, and I watched from a distance, detached but observant, like a woman watching a storm she'd once lived through. The headlines began again. Ethan Carter spotted with an up-and-coming model at a beach resort. Ethan photographed entering a hotel with the daughter of a Fortune 500 CEO. Ethan rumored to be dating 2 influencers at once. It was like watching a midlife crisis unravel in slow motion. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't comment. But the media sure did. People started whispering again about me this time. Did you hear Claire got dumped at 30? She thought she could keep him by being loyal. How naive. She must be bitter, watching him live his best life. My assistant relayed it all to me while I sipped an oat milk latte in the garden. I didn't even blink. Let them talk, I said, adjusting my sunglasses. What they say doesn't pay my mortgage. And that was the truth. I had the house, the money, the kids, and most importantly, peace. Ethan had noise. Flashbulbs. Shallow women who giggled too loud and kissed for the camera. He didn't even look happy, he looked tired. The next time we were at the same event, I wore red. Not just any red. The kind of red that said, I'm not heartbroken, I am on fire and untouchable. He showed up with another interchangeable woman, blonde this time, with that same vacant smile. Our eyes met across the ballroom, and for a second, he hesitated like he forgot where he was or who he came with. I nodded politely, then turned my attention back to the conversation I was having with a private equity partner who actually remembered my name without needing a bodyguard to whisper it in his ear. Later, in the car, my assistant said, "You're really over him." I glanced at her, amused. "Isn't it obvious?" She smiled. "It is now. But life always has a way of testing your resolve just when you think you've closed a chapter." One morning, while making breakfast for the kids, I heard the doorbell ring. I assumed it was a delivery, but when I opened the door, there he was standing in the same clothes from the night before, hair tousled, eyes red, a mess of a man trying to hold it together. "What are you doing here?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "I just needed to see you," he said. "I'm losing my mind, Claire. None of this feels real anymore. These women, the parties, the noisy, it's all hollow. I go home and there's nothing. No light. No laughter. Just silence that mocks me." I didn't say anything. I didn't invite him in. He kept going. I think about the way you used to wait up for me, even when I was late. The way you knew exactly how I liked my coffee. The way you'd touch the back of my neck when I was stressed. I didn't know what I had. I was too full of myself to see it. And now I just want to come home. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. You're home, I said, pointing at the empty street behind him. That's your life now. The one you built after leaving mine. I don't want it, he said. Then why did you choose it? I asked, not out of anger, but out of genuine confusion. Why did you spend months proving to the world you didn't need me, only to come crawling back now that no one else feels right? He exhaled slowly. Because I thought I'd find a new version of you. Someone who made me feel that spark again. But I realized you weren't a spark. You were the match, the flame, the whole fire. And I can't light it without you. I stared at him, not because the words moved me, but because they were too little, too late. Do you know what I realized? I said quietly. That I don't want to be someone's fire anymore. I want to be my own peace. His eyes dimmed. Claire, please no, I said, stepping back. You don't get to call me by my name like it still means something. You don't get to show up here and expect me to forget the years I spent holding our marriage together while you stared at your phone and forgot anniversaries. You don't get to tell me you regret it now and hope I'll just let you back in. You chose distance. Now live in it. He looked like he'd been slapped, and maybe in a way he had. But I didn't owe him softness anymore. I owed it to myself to stay firm. That evening, I took the kids to the movies. We laughed, shared popcorn, and when Lucas leaned his head on my shoulder halfway through, I felt something stronger than romantic love, purpose. I wasn't broken. I wasn't bitter. I was busy building a life that made sense without a man who only remembered my value once I stopped offering it to him for free. Ethan sent one last text that night. It read, "I'll wait for as long as it takes." I didn't respond. Silence was my answer now. The next day, I saw a tabloid headline about Ethan's latest rumored fling, and all I felt was tired. Not angry, not jealous, just tired of the cycle. I closed the article, turned off my phone, and opened a blank page on my laptop. My assistant had been pushing me to write a memoir, something about love, betrayal, and healing. Maybe I would. Maybe it was time to let my story be more than a whisper behind a scandal. Maybe it was time to be loud about the quiet strength it takes to leave someone you once thought you'd never live without. Because if there's one thing I know now, it's this: some men only recognize gold when it stops glittering for them. And by then, it's already been forged into something they can't afford. So let Ethan chase shadows and echoes of the woman I used to be. I'm no longer her. I'm better. And for the first time in years, I don't miss the man I used to love. I just pity the boy who threw her away. It's strange how quiet regret becomes when you stop feeding it, how the echoes of someone's absence eventually dull into background noise, and then one day you realize you haven't thought about them at all. Not even when passing by their favorite coffee shop or hearing that song they used to hum in the shower. And it doesn't feel like loss, Anna Maria, it feels like closure, like healing disguised as indifference, and that's what it became with Ethan, a ghost I stopped chasing. A man who kept circling my orbit hoping to get another shot at the sun he once thought would shine for him forever, but I had turned inward, toward my own warmth, and I wasn't spinning for anyone else now, not even for nostalgia. Not even for the what-if version of him that showed up late, clean-shaven, shoulders stiff with practiced regret, holding apologies like roses with hidden thorns, because apologies don't stitch up trust. And love doesn't bloom again just because someone finally waters the grave they dug with their own neglect, and I was done mourning the marriage I tried so hard to keep alive while he was busy watching it wilt, too self-absorbed to notice that I had already buried the version of myself that once begged for his attention, for crumbs of what used to be love, and now I was building something else, something new, something minimally routine, my mornings filled with sunlight and breakfast with Lucas and Emma, their laughter bouncing off the walls that no longer heard shouting, matches, or late-night silence heavy with resentment, just the rustle of pages as we read together, the clink of dishes, the sound of a life that no longer revolved around a man who mistook my loyalty for permanence, and yet, as predictable as the seasons, Ethan showed up again, this time at the company where I'd just been promoted to VP of Operations, wearing that familiar gray suit, holding 2 coffees, always trying to open old doors with keys that didn't fit anymore, and he asked, so casually it felt forced, "Can we talk?" And I said, just as casually, "We are," and he followed me into my office, eyes scanning the framed photo of our kids on my desk, the plaque with my name. The proof that I'd risen higher without him than I ever did beside him, and he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're really doing well," and I replied, "I've always been doing well, you just didn't notice." And maybe that was the most painful truth of all, not that he left, not that he flirted with girls who looked like younger versions of me, not that he failed to protect our marriage, but that he only began to see me clearly after I was gone, after I stopped shining for him, after I stopped waiting for him to meet me halfway, and even now. I could see it in the way he looked at me, like I was some ethereal dream he'd let slip through his fingers, and now that reality had clawed its way back into his life. He was trying to replace guilt with effort, regret with romanticized memories. But I was no longer that woman, not the girl who forgave so easily, not the wife who stayed up waiting for the sound of his keys in the door, not the mother who muted her own dreams for the sake of keeping the peace. I was Claire Bennett. And I'd learned that peace built on silence and self-sacrifice isn't peace at all, it's erasure, and I refused to disappear again, not for him, not for anyone. So when he handed me a small box and said, "I know it's late, but I wanted to return this," I opened it and saw the necklace I gave him in our second year of marriage, the one with our initials engraved on a tiny silver plate, the one he said he never took off until one day I realized it was just gone. Like everything else we used to cherish, and I looked at it, then at him, and asked, "Why now?" And he whispered, "Because I've been trying to carry you with me in the wrong ways, through photos, through substitutes, through excuses, and I thought maybe if I gave this back, I could stop." Hoping, and I wanted to say something cruel, something that would finally make him stop showing up, but instead, I just nodded, placed the box on my desk, and said, "Good, because hope should be earned, not assumed, and love should be maintained, not memorized." And I didn't owe him anything, not comfort, not closure, not even eye contact, so I turned back to my laptop and waited for him to leave, which he eventually did, quietly, like a page turning itself, and I didn't watch him go, because I didn't need to anymore. I had already closed the chapter, I had already written the ending, and it wasn't about his redemption, it was about my freedom, and in the weeks that followed, he stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped sending flowers or playlists or half-hearted attempts at proving he was still relevant in my story, and I began to forget the sound of his voice, the cadence of his footsteps, the way he used to laugh at his own jokes, and it was peaceful, gloriously, unapologetically peaceful. And then one afternoon, I was in the kitchen icing cupcakes with Emma while Lucas did math problems at the counter, and Ethan rang the doorbell, not barging in like he used to, not pretending he still belonged, just standing there with his hands in his coat pockets, eyes soft, and said, "The kids asked if I could come by and help decorate," and I looked at him, then at the children, then at myself in the oven's reflection, and realized that I wasn't angry anymore. Wasn't bitter, wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just done, and that was enough. So I let him in, not as a man I loved, but as the father of my children, and we decorated those ridiculous cupcakes together, and he left when it was time to go, no lingering, no pleading, no side glances toward the life he no longer had access to, and I knew that while he might never stop loving me, he would finally stop trying to make that love my responsibility. And as the door clicked shut behind him, I smiled to myself, not because I won, but because I was free, because I had survived the slow erosion of a marriage, the aching realization that love isn't always enough, and come out stronger, kinder, and more whole than I ever was when I was someone's wife. And that night, as I tucked the kids into bed, Emma asked if Daddy was staying over, and I kissed her forehead and said, "Not tonight, baby," and Lucas nodded like he understood something too big for words, and I stepped into my room, closed the door, and exhaled the final breath I hadn't even realized I'd been holding for years, because some people never get the love they deserve, and others walk away from the love they needed. But the luckiest one, the ones who truly heal, are those who learn to give themselves the love they always gave so freely to others. And I was one of them, no longer waiting, no longer chasing, no longer hurting, just living, fully and completely, finally.